Good evening, everyone. So now we have Nadia Sood with us. Nadia Sood is the founder and group CEO of CreditEnable, an award-winning global credit insights and technology solutions company. Prior to setting up CreditEnable and over her more than 20-year career, Nadia had founded and built several successful businesses, including Impact Investment Partners LLP, the first FCA-authorized impact investment management and advisory services firm in the UK. She is the director of Strategic Health and Wellness, Nestlé, where she helped transition Nestlé from a food and beverages company to a nutrition, health, and wellness company. Nadia is also a member of the SME Finance Forum's Governing Council and has received several awards, including being named one of the 100 women entrepreneurs building and shaping India. Let's give it up for Nadia. Over to you, Nadia.
Thank you so much. I feel that I have very large shoes to fill this afternoon, and hopefully I'll keep you a little bit awake before your drinks. So I thought today I would reflect a little bit on the talks that came before me and try to speak a little bit about so I thought I would try to speak a little bit about some of my reflections on what was said today, a little bit about innovation and its history in India, and try to reflect on it slightly differently. Then show you a little bit about how we're taking advantage of what is India to try to deliver change in the financial services sector, and then leave you with some thoughts to challenge you about what you might be thinking about doing next, and where there is a lacuna in terms of, we like to think that everything is brilliant and progressing in a great way, but there are a lot of things that also need to change. So we've heard from some very distinguished speakers today about a number of different topics related to India and innovation. Jugad, going against the grain. Mr. Kantu spoke about leadership and the importance of leading from behind rather than leading from the front. And so I wanted to reflect a little bit about how I see India. And how I see India is as a diasporatic Indian who grew up in Canada with a father who immigrated from India in 1964 because he had started doing his PhD and had about every 3 months a new PhD advisor. And at some point he said to himself, either I never finish my PhD or I move with one of them. And so he ended up in Canada. And I grew up going back and forth to India, but never living there, and then later working there and investing there. So one of the things I think is very interesting to think about is the way that India has embraced innovation from very early days. And we can go back way before 1920, but I think it's interesting to think about the 1920s and the non-cooperation movement, and even how that went against the grain. Everyone thinks about passive resistance movement, but what was really happening in a lot of parts of the world where colonialism had taken force was people were becoming violent against the colonial master. And in India, people were doing things against the grain. How can we protest at scale? And it was about at scale without becoming violent. So this is a very interesting, I think, example of innovation at its truest core. If you fast forward to the 1970s, we heard from Dr. Hamid about the work that he did to lobby for changes in the pharmaceutical regulatory framework. And then look at the transformative effect that actually had. It wasn't straight away, but by 2001, we were in a position where India was able to deliver drugs that were transforming the world. And in fact, a regime of transformation that changed the power dynamics completely for the pharmaceutical industry and insisted on morality over profit. So the fundamental concept which you discussed this morning about which is more important, the life or the profit? And on certain points, of course, it is life first and not profit. If we look ahead, we look again to this whole question of the brain drain. I talked about it with my father, having immigrated in the 60s. But this was happening as far back as before the 60s. In the 40s, people started moving around because they could see that colonialism was going to take a different shape. Perhaps it was going to collapse. And we can think about all the great Indian minds who went abroad and came to Cambridge and went to universities in the United States and in Canada. A notable member of this university, Vikram Sarabhai, who went to St. John's College at Cambridge, who's credited with being really the founder of the Indian space program in the 1960s. And then if you fast forward to that legacy, you get to 2023 and India actually being the first country to land on the South Pole of the moon. So this interrelationship also between Indians having a wanderlust and traveling abroad and then coming back and bringing the best of both worlds together is very evidenced in this trajectory that we see in space. And we heard about that also yesterday at our dinner from your interim dean, when we talked about how the space innovation that India has championed has led to a lot of other transformative things. Massive transformation in agriculture, massive transformation in connectivity. If you think about GPS and the ability to understand where you're going, the ability to predict weather patterns, the ability to save people from disaster, all of which is facilitated by having a very strong space program and by having one of the largest satellite fleets in the world. We move now to then how has innovation been transformative on a digital front in India? You have 2009, the introduction of Aadhaar, 2016, UPI. You have 2023, cardless UPI. And in 24, the fiscal year of 24, 131 billion transactions, 2.2 trillion US dollars transacted via UPI. And just to give you a contextual point so you can relate how large is that number, the entire US GDP is 28 trillion. So that's catching up pretty close. So huge amounts of innovation happening. And on to data and AI, we talked about that a lot as well. So November 2023, you'll all remember, ChatGPT launched. And then there was ChatGPT 3 and ChatGPT 4. But the interesting stat I was discussing with a couple of you yesterday is that because of the framework that exists in India, because of digital penetration, because of the focus on technology, what has happened is that 92% of knowledge workers in India use AI at work as compared to the global figure of 70%. And even more interestingly is that in a recent survey that one of the biggest global HR firms did, 85% of people who are in employment in India, this is not just knowledge workers, but people in employment, are trying to use AI in some way, shape, or form to make themselves more productive and to upskill themselves. And what this means is that you no longer need to attend a university like Cambridge to be able to become useful at work. You need only to try to upskill yourself and to use the tools that are available to you on the internet, which you now are able to access quite freely because of those investments into space and infrastructure, to be able to become a highly contributor member of society. And of course, this year, December last year, a fact you may all know, but you may not, it was a bit hidden, was that India actually became the #1 country in terms of data per mobile user in the world. So imagine the sheer number of people who now have access to the most amazing amounts of information with infrastructure that almost makes the sky the limit. So I thought I would talk a little bit about what I'm doing and how I'm benefiting from this and in the business that I run, which is squarely focused on trying to address the problem of access to affordable finance for SMEs. And what we've been able to do is to build a technology platform that helps deliver that very quickly to people. We've been able to allow SMEs to access loans all across the country. The loan I'm most proud of is a loan that we delivered to an entrepreneur in Assam during May 2021 lockdown in India, where he actually was able to secure a 25 lakh unsecured business loan in less than 3 hours, and that allowed him to double his manufacturing capabilities to then deliver PPE equipment all across the country to save lives. And this is all because of innovation and technology. We have about 5 lakh SMEs that we work with as customers. And what we're trying to do now is use machine learning to even further accelerate the impact that we can have on this segment of the economy, which, by the way, is the most important segment in terms of growth, in that SMEs are contributing close to 47% of GDP in India. They are the engines of job creation, and they need to get adequate access to finance. So what can ML do? I'm going to spend just 2 minutes showing you a video about a financial wellness program that we've built entirely on ML. And this helps an SME understand their credit position, whether or not they're going to be considered creditworthy by a lender. If they're not, how are they supposed to fix that? And showing them a pathway to allowing them to change fundamentally their position in under 6 months' time. And I'll show you this because I want to show you then what we need to do next and how this is just a drop in the ocean, really.
Are you struggling to get your business loan approved? Or are you paying high interest rates? You are not alone. Only 10% of Indian SMEs get approved for loans.
Can you hear
This
this?
doesn't have to be the case anymore. Introducing Shine, a financial wellness program for SMEs by CreditEnable in partnership with Experian. Get the insight you need to take control of your financial future. Get quick and easy steps each quarter that simplify your path to better loan terms. Understand the level you are at today and how to improve and move up. Get a 360 degrees view on your business each quarter. See what story your credit report, GST filings, and banking history tell about your creditworthiness. What's going well and what needs to improve so you can get the funding you want. Understand how lenders analyze your business across multiple factors. See your strengths and weaknesses from their point of view. Get clear, actionable advice every quarter that helps you take the necessary steps to improve your loan prospects. Discover your loan approval chances from over 40 lenders and learn how implementing our expert advice enhances your odds. Shine is affordable, comprehensive, and easy to use, making it the perfect solution for SMEs. Enroll today and get on the path of financial empowerment. See real results. Become loan ready and get lower interest rates in 3 to 6 months. Shine, take control of your financial future. Start your journey to financial success today.
So based on ML, we've been able to create this program for SMEs. Within the first month, we helped 500 companies who had been rejected in the market achieve $5 million loan. And we were able to do this because we could aggregate very large amounts of data on decisions that lenders had taken about SMEs and their applications and help retool that so that an SME could then understand what it needed to do in order to change that outcome. So very happy also to be able to launch this product, this program in collaboration also with Niti Aayog and their Women's Empowerment Program. We're going to be able to reach many women entrepreneurs specifically who really struggle even more to access finance.
Are you struggling?
So that's the rosy picture, but what about what needs to change? And underneath all of that innovation, what are still the issues that we should be really cognizant of. So we all hear about the wonderful aspiration, the wonderful positivity, the future potential of India, which is that we're looking at the economy going from a 3.5 trillion GDP economy today to 7.5 trillion by 2031. Yet what we also talked about in the morning were some of the underlying issues which really deserve attention and where that innovation focus really needs to be. And as MBA students, I encourage you to think about those activities. They may be niche, they may be large, they may be macro, that would be focused on addressing some of these pressing problems. So let's talk about three broad problem sets. You have climate change. With being such an enormous economy comes an enormous responsibility. A huge number of people all consuming every single day in various capacities and delivering pollution into the world. And unfortunately, India, sits at number 3 largest polluter with 3.5 million tons of CO2 being emitted. So this is an area where certainly any of you working in climate change and the intersection of climate change and finance there's an ample amount of opportunity there to be building interesting businesses, interesting interventions to address this. Financial inclusion. While India has the highest, consumption of data per person in the world, it also has a ways to go on financial inclusion. Only 14% of small businesses in the country have access to formal finance. Because they don't have access, the rest don't have access to formal finance, what they do is they go to the informal finance market for that access, where they pay upwards of 200% interest for the privilege of getting the loan that they need in order to continue to pay the staff that they have on their books. And this really needs to change. The growth in SME segment in India is 20% CAGR compounded annually, and most of those companies are going to struggle to access finance, and the women entrepreneurs within that group will struggle even harder, because we still have a huge disparity in terms of access to finance in India, where women are asked to go through more onerous processes than men, even if they're in the same position in a company. And nearly every financial institution in India demands a male co-applicant on a loan application, even if the business is entirely run by a woman. So there's still some huge inequity that needs to be addressed. And certainly access to finance must be supported if we're going to even achieve that $7.5 trillion economic projection. We talked about healthcare this morning with Dr. Hamid. The numbers there are not looking very good. If this is Statista's list of healthcare ranking by country, you see all the normal suspects of the developed economies in the top, and India ranking at 112. Now, if it's going to be the 3rd largest economy in the world, it shouldn't really want to stay at being 112. In its provision of healthcare to its citizens, because eventually, even if in the short term that doesn't have a deterrent impact on growth, it certainly is going to have one in the medium to long term. And so as you're thinking about, what can you do and how can you make a difference, I wanted to leave you with those 3 areas where anything you do on any of those big questions is going to leave a significant impact, because the magnitude of the problem is so large, the number of people impacted by the problem is so enormous, and India's potential contribution on the positive front is also there to be had for the taking. So I think I'll end there. I hope I've adequately summarized the day for you, and happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Hi, wonderful work. Thank you for the talk. I just wanted to know your thoughts on extending this to empower small-scale farmers in India. Do you think something like this could be implemented in that sense? If yes, what are the challenges? What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. So I think it has applicability to a variety of different constituents. What's key, I think, in financial literacy and financial education is being able to communicate conceptually to the group that you're working with in a manner that is relevant to them and they can also understand. So I think if we were going to launch a product specifically tailored to farmers, we would be looking at maybe honing in more on the things that matter on a day-to-day basis for them. So for example, cost of agricultural input, cost of fertilizer, managing those things, managing data around climate, how do they interpret that, and maybe wrapping the product with some beneficial value adds for them that are more relevant than just the pure financials.
Do you think it will be financially viable? Will we be able to make a business model out of it? Given the, I'm talking about small scale farmers with 1 acre or 2 acres of land. And then will they be able to pay for services like this?
Yes, I think certainly, and that's the beauty of being able to be in the technology sector, where you can build a product for scale at quite low cost. So riding on data, you can produce something that people don't necessarily have to pay very much for, but can derive a huge amount of value. So it's important just to be able to calibrate to affordability in terms of what is there at the end of the day, how much disposable income do they have at the end of the month, and then how does that product calibrate with what they'll earn on the back of improving themselves.
We have one last question.
So as CreditEnable, what is the current challenge that you are focusing on in terms of a product or in terms of, if you're able to divulge the information that is, what is the challenge that you're currently doing?
Yeah, so when we started our business, the idea was to remove friction from the lending segment and the borrowing segment. So we built a technology platform that sits between lenders and SMEs and makes both of their lives easier and more cost effective. But then what we quickly realized was that when we did that, we were only solving for a small part of the population's problem. The larger part of the population, so out of every 100 people who go into the market for debt in any economy who are small business owners on any given day, only 10% of those loan transactions will actually clear successfully. The other 90 don't clear because the lender doesn't want the borrower doesn't want the lender. And most of the time, it has to do with the fact that the borrower, particularly the small business owner, is not ready to engage in a discussion with the lender and is not actually going to be seen as creditworthy. So what if we could take the data that we had and we could take the technology that we had, that we used to analyze and drive decisions about where to place the borrower with which lender, and flip that around and use it to solve a problem that's going to impact on the 90 other guys of the 100. And so that's the challenge that we're working on now.
I think there's also from the borrower's aspect, reliance on informal finance as well, right?
Yes.
The past dependency.
Yes.
Because there's not much awareness on formal finance.
Yes, but the interesting thing is normally the constraint is not that they have like a desire to remain there, because the delta between that and the other alternative is so large, and it's so much more beneficial to be in the formal market. It's that they can't enter the formal market because they don't know how to. They lack documentation. They're employing behavior that's seen as financial indiscipline by the lending institutions. So educating them is very critical, but educating them in a practical way. So not telling, I have this really interesting anecdote where I was talking to one of my lender partners about a borrower, and they said, we explained to them what's wrong with them. I said, what did you say? They said, your revenue isn't high enough. And I asked the SME, what do you think about this? And they said, boss, that's why I went there. I need more cash. Right? Now, there's a mismatch between what I'm understanding and what he's understanding. And so being that bridge in between and being able to do it in a very simple manner is very critical.
Yeah, well, and we'll take some questions. Sorry. Yeah. No, thanks for that. Very, very thought-provoking. Just a couple of questions. You mentioned mentioned financial literacy, and one of the things that you see as to why there is a high penetration of credit in recent markets versus, let's say, India, is regulatory frameworks which protect both sides of both the lender and the borrower, whether it be consumer or business credit in this case. How do you find that working with India in terms of the regulatory frameworks? I know you work with DTIO, but is that a one-off, or do you find the thinking is there which allows for the credit industry to function like the way it does here with the FCA and so on and so forth?
No, I don't think there's a lacuna of regulatory framework in India. In fact, the RBI is very active, and it's probably one of the most active regulators in the world. And I think it's quite a thoughtful regulator, actually, about how it implements things and how it's thinking about its impact on society. I think the problem we have in India is the application of the interpretation of that regulation and the application and understanding of it, meaning, the problem of access to credit is largely due to the fact that there's still a very informal way of running a business in India, for the most part, which impedes then the lender's ability to really assess you properly and also to understand the risk involved with you. So if you looked at, if you just took a sample of British companies that were small, on the very small end of things, and you checked how many of them were not running with appropriate licenses, or they had allowed their licenses to lapse, the percentage would be very small. Because there's sort of a fear that if you don't have your license in place, then eventually someone will catch you and you won't be able to continue. I think if you did a similar survey in India, you would find compliance to be quite low. And that then makes it difficult for the lender to say, I can have faith that you'll pay back your loan, because you can't even keep your shop and establishments license up to date. It's catching up, but there are some historic legacy issues which are to do with the fact that, for example, there was not really a bankruptcy law in India until quite recently. So that meant that if your company failed, you didn't close it, it just remained there and it kind of continued on and you stripped out all the assets. So the kind of ways in which people have built probability of default models in the West, it's difficult to emulate those in any emerging market where they haven't had a long history of companies becoming insolvent. That said, on the other hand, you've got so much demographic data, behavioral data, alternative sources of data that you can use to create different sorts of risk models. So I think what's going to be interesting is not whether India emulates the other models, as to whether it is able to create new innovative models that are very applicable to lots of other countries in the world where they also have issues with the time linear data sets.
So about the collaboration with Experian, can you talk a bit more about that? So what is it? How did you go about it? And do they help out on the technical aspect as well, or is it just do they expand on?
So obviously it's really important to a part of this whole process of understanding a business is whether you can understand the performance of their repayment of debt. So we work with Experian to understand that, but we also work with them to understand, how can we present data to customers in a way that will be more understandable to them? Can we give them more context around a piece of data? For example, right now we're looking at telling you about your credit score, but could we then tell you about your credit score in relation to other people in your location to help you better understand that this is not just poor in isolation, it's poor relative to everyone else, and that's going to make it even more difficult for you to grow. So we collaborate on trying to understand, because they have very large data sets at a macro level across the country. How do we make better use of the data, and then how do we, provide you better context as you're looking into it?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
get you a gift. Awesome. So we're probably going to close this, but I'll let Professor Jaideep Prabhu have the last word. But before that, I really want to thank everybody who've come here, especially from Oxford and London Business School, and Mr. Ravi Kant and Lopa Patel and Nadia Sood as well. So really, thank you so much for coming, and I'll let Professor Jaideep.
Thank you, Ravi. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Jaideep Prabhu. I'm a professor of marketing and also chair in Indian business here at Judge Business School, and I co-direct the Center for India and Global Business along with Marvin. So if you'll permit me to be a bit of a professor, I just want to reflect on some of the wonderful things, the wonderful insights we've had from all our speakers today. And I'll start with Lopa. Here are a few things I took away from your talk. The power of inclusion, the importance of diversity for innovation, and don't strive for success, but to be of value. Dr. Yusuf Hamid talked about the importance of implementation of innovation. And of course, about the importance of affordable healthcare, not just for India, but for the world. He also talked a lot about the role of IP and how we need to think carefully about that. Mr. Ravi Kant, so wonderful to have you here. What I took away from your talk, the importance of leading from the back, be open, collaborate, aim high, and innovate to bridge the gap. Then we had the panel. Persis Bilimoria talked about the importance of being ahead of the curve and bringing people along. He also talked about how biodiversity needs to be symbiotic with economics. Dr. Arvind Padi talked about the importance of agriculture to any economy, particularly India's. He talked about how climate affects agriculture, agriculture affects climate, but no need to panic, there are solutions. Lots of policy solutions, such as the Millets Mission. Lieutenant Colonel Ahuja spoke about the huge opportunity to generate economic value from agri-residue. You can generate value from waste. So important for India. A lot of waste from agriculture, but we need energy that could come from the waste. The importance of long-term policy and implementation, and the importance of different ministries coming together to address these problems or challenges. Then Karan Bilimoria talked about the importance of where good ideas come from. Good ideas come from being a dissatisfied customer. We ourselves might be dissatisfied customers. That gives us ideas. He talked about the importance of luck, and luck being where determination meets opportunity. Arya Taware talked about the importance of jugaad, hustle, role models, the importance of financial freedom, the power of the Indian diaspora, and then a lovely quote, don't judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree. Deep Kalra, listen to your gut. That was counterintuitive. Too much money, too many bad habits. You've got to scuba dive in India and build best in the world, not just best in India. And Nadia, finally, you don't need to go to Cambridge to succeed. And that suggests India doesn't need Cambridge. Cambridge needs India. And the world, not just Cambridge, can learn a lot from India about innovation, going back some years. And SMEs, the importance of SMEs, the engines of job creation. Huge challenge for India, job creation. SMEs could be that, and lending to them is important. So thank you so much to our speakers for these amazing insights that they have shared with us, the time that they have shared with us today. Many have come from far to be with us. We deeply, deeply appreciate that. So thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you so much to my own colleagues who have helped organize this conference. Many of them are my faculty colleagues, Marvin, Sarish, Cal, so many of Judge Business School colleagues who have helped make this happen. You, the audience. Without the audience, we would not have this wonderful dialogue. It's a dialogue between you and the speakers. You've been so participative, so engaged. Your questions have been amazing. I've seen the networking that's been wonderful. But most of all, I have to thank our students, and particularly those who organized this conference. I am completely blown away by how they have done this. On top of our MBA is less than a year. It's very intense. They have lots of things going on. They have lots of other things they have to do outside the Judge Business School in their colleges, the rest of the university. They have to look for jobs, and still they have been able to do this. So I would request them, please come up, and we'll give you a big, big round of applause. So Ujjwal, please come up. Ravi, Tanmay, Dhruv, Ashutosh, Lavanya, Mansa, Rushali, Tanu, am I leaving out anyone? Please, anyone else, if I've left you out, please come up here. You all deserve a massive, massive round of applause. Please give them a huge round of applause. Am I missing? Some of them are downstairs, so we should go downstairs and thank them now. So please join us downstairs for a reception. We thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.